have been doing calligraphy since I was a little girl, that they absolutely do need to do some flourishing. I will never post my work on Instagram. Since I was a little girl. I would sit for hours and copy the letters out of my mom's Speedball textbook. She had the 19th edition. And I would fill up notebooks trying to copy those letters. I would try to copy all the styles, but the copper plate exemplar was my very favorite. And I would either do it with a ballpoint pen or a pencil. And I think later on, it really helped me because I studied the letter forms really, really well because I was just drawing them with a pencil or a pen. And so it made me really learn what the letters were supposed to look like. And so in '93, I took some samples around to some stationery stores where I lived, and I had this one sweet lady who was so kind to me. We just clicked, and she would recommend me as a calligrapher to her brides that needed calligraphers, and so I kind of got my name out, my work out a little bit, and then when social media hit, that was a true game changer. And so when I started posting my work on Instagram, it just sort of kind of exploded a little bit, and I just started doing more and more work. And so it just kind of snowballed from there. I am self-taught a lot, but I have also taken a lot of lessons. I've taken from, I don't even know, countless people, probably over 20 different people I've taken lessons from, at least, maybe more than that. So a little bit of both. But I do feel like when I started taking lessons, I really had the letter forms down in my mind, and I had the muscle memory a great part before that from studying as a child. So I feel like when I took that first lesson, I was a little bit ahead of the game because I already knew the letter forms, even though I didn't realize it at the time. And so I think that sort of put me a little bit on a fast track, maybe. So honestly, I would recommend both. I would recommend getting exemplars that you trust that they're correct, whether it's, Googling the Zahner exemplar of 1918. That's one I refer to a lot. Or whether it's getting the Speedball textbook, whether it's looking up historical scripts on Anne-Davnes.com. That's a great way to study scripts, print them off. Look at where the curves fall, look at where the shades fall, study on your own, but also never turn down the opportunity to take a lesson, whether it's in person, online. I think there are great pros and cons to being in person and online. I think there are just drawbacks and pros to each way, and I think you need to do as much of both way as you can. I truly do, and I think like when you're in person, you get that in person, the teacher is right there, they can see your work, that is second to none. But then when you're online, you can go back and rewatch, you can rewind little segments, you can practice a little bit, go back and watch it again. So truly, I think they're all the best way to study and learn. They're all different from each other. But I really do think that each one is just as important as the other one is. Yeah. So this is what I recommend to people to do. And this is just my personal opinion. You probably won't find this in a book anywhere, but it's just my opinion. I feel like if you're going to learn on your own how to do, say, copperplate or whatever script it is you want to learn, find an exemplar, A through Z, majuscules, minuscules, that you know and trust that that's correct. Like you trust that that exemplar is completely correct. You get your A, for example. You look at that A, you study everything about that letter form. If it's a lowercase a, you study where the entry stroke meets the oval. You study where the underturn meets the oval. Just study everything about it. And then on your sheet of paper, get your, start with a pencil. Get your pencil out, make a row of A's. Don't make a whole page, because if you're doing it wrong, you're just reinforcing the wrong way that you're doing it. So make maybe a row, 6 or 8 or 10 of them, and then stop and go back and look at the difference in that A and the A's that you made. Even lay yours on top, or even trace it to try to get the muscle memory. That is a great way to sort of kind of cheat and fast track your way to get the proper muscle memory. Just trace over it, if you can blow it up, large enough. But make little notes beside each one that you did. This oval is too narrow. This oval is too fat. I've cut off the entry stroke. Put a check mark by the ones that you like. That one looks great. And so when you study that one row and you know exactly what you did wrong and exactly what you did right, then move down and make another row of A's. And do the same thing and work your way down the paper, and by the time you get to your bottom row, I can promise you that bottom row is going to look better than what your top row was. And even if for whatever reason it doesn't look better, you're going to know in your mind exactly what you've done wrong, exactly what you've done right. And I always say, knowing it is 90% of it. Because if you can't see what you've done wrong, your hand can't correct it. So as long as your mind knows what to do, your hand will catch up with practice. You got to practice, but as long as you know what you're doing wrong, you know what you're supposed to do right, your hand will catch up. So by studying each row and putting little notes, that's going to really give you an in-depth knowledge of what that particular stroke or that particular letter is supposed to look like. And hopefully by the time you get to the bottom, it will be way better than the ones at the top. Yeah, and then move on to the next thing that you want to study. And you don't have to spend hours and hours doing that. If you have 15 or 20 minutes, sit down and make 3 rows. The next time you have 15 or 20 minutes, sit down and try it again. Just go at your own pace.
I love that.
Yeah. One other thing that I would suggest too is don't, and again, this is just my personal opinion, I would not suggest like one 6-hour practice session. I would break it up into little smaller chunks all throughout the week. Because, whatever, say if you're in college and you sit down to study for a test, if you study in like little 20 or 30-minute increments and take like a little 5-minute break, whatever you learn at the beginning and whatever you learn at the end, you remember that more than what you do in the middle. So if you have more beginnings and endings, you're going to remember more. So I say do it in smaller little pieces versus, an all-day practice session. And those are great too, but if you're really trying to do it as efficiently as you can, I would suggest doing it in little smaller pieces.
Yeah.
So this is my opinion on modern script. I am a purist in that I love the copperplate script. I love the Spencerian script. I don't do a lot of modern script, but every time I'm asked to do a modern script, say for a birthday party or whatever the case may be, I'm commissioned to do modern script. And I begin to write it. I'm like, this is really fun. And, a formal copperplate or Spencerian doesn't fit every occasion. If you have to address 25 envelopes to a little girl's birthday party, you don't want that in a formal copperplate. You want it in, just a little fun, cutesy script that fits the occasion. So I do think sometimes it gets a bad rap, although I do see a lot of bad modern script. So I see why it gets a bad rap, because there's a lot of it out there that doesn't look that great. I do feel like the modern script that is very closely related to copperplate, like you take a pure copperplate form and you change it just a little bit and turn it into a modern, I feel like that looks way better than just a modern that's just really up, down, up, down, up, down, and it's just so messy that you can't really read it as well. So whenever I write modern, I really try to keep it reined in. Less is more. Just a little bit goes a long way. I always say with flourishing and with a modern script. It doesn't take a lot to turn a copper plate into something looser and more fun and not quite as formal. So just a little bit is all that you need to do. So I say all of that to say I do think it gets a bad rap, but I understand why it gets a bad rap, because there's a lot of it out there that's not that great. But I absolutely 100% think that there is a place and a time for it, that it fits way better than a formal historical script, 100%. Mm-hmm. Okay, first of all, if I'm coming up with a new script, most of the time it's just for me kind of playing around with letters, and I'm like, oh, I really like the way that B turned out. And so I'll make the B over and over, then I might kind of tweak it a little bit, and then I'm like, well, if I do that to the B, I can do the same thing to the H, the K, the L, any ascender. I can do the same thing, but on the low side to the descenders, well, that's half your letters. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I think I've got something here. So really, I don't ever sit down and go, okay, I've got to come up with a new script. What do I want to do? It's really mainly me just sitting there kind of playing around and having fun, and then going, oh, I like the way that looks. Let me kind of play with this letter a little bit. And then it just kind of grows from there. Usually it starts with the lowercase letters, because that's what you use most often. And then when I get the lowercase letters, then it gets a little bit trickier for me, because then I have to create the majuscules to fit the minuscules. And it has to have the same kind of feel, the same kind of vibe to it. But it's so much fun. It really is so much fun. But usually when I get the whole thing, I'll let it sit for a day or so. I'll come back and look at it again, and I'll write it again, and then I'll be like, why did I make that A that way? That's totally not in the same vibe with the rest of the letters. So I'll change it, and then I'll let that sit and marinate for a day or so. I'll come back again. A lot of times I'll take a picture of my work, because there is something about taking a picture of your work and looking at the picture. The inconsistencies and the things that I want to change jump out at me when I'm looking at it on my phone. I can look at the actual sheet of paper and go, oh, well, that looks fine. I'm totally happy with that. But then if I make a picture of it and I go to look at the picture, I'll be like, why did I do that? This is so totally wrong. It's like it just jumps out at me. So I definitely do that. And I just sort of go slowly and take my time, maybe over a couple of weeks, and constantly tweaking it. I'm teaching Imperial script tomorrow, and I've even changed 2 of the letters over what's in the handouts, and I like them way better. And I was just kind of refreshing myself with what all the letter forms looked like right before I left to come here. And when I got to the V and the W, I was like, why did I do that? That's totally not what those letters need to look like. So I changed them. So I've got to tell everybody that tomorrow. But it's always evolving. It's always evolving. So, and usually anytime I teach Imperial or a modern script, I always tell people, you know, if you don't like exactly the way this letter looks, change it to whatever you want to, and just do it that way and own it. You know, it's probably not going to change the overall look of the script. So if you don't like one little stroke or one letter, just do it however you want to do it. You know, this is not rocket science. The police are not going to come track you down. You do what makes you happy. So a lot of what they're needing the piece for dictates what the color is going to be. If I ever have to write anything on handmade paper, I always use a Gillette 404. It's not quite as sharp and pointed as the Hunt 101, so like on upstrokes, it doesn't catch as easily. So it's my favorite nib for writing on any kind of handmade paper, or really any kind of really rough textured paper. It's a great nib. For that especially. I also will use that nib if I ever have to write with metallic ink. I don't know why, but it works better than any other nib that I've found with metallic ink. Now, just with regular ink, I'll have to say I'm not crazy about the nib because the hairlines are not super fine, but with metallic ink and on handmade paper, great hairlines. I don't know what the science is behind it, and I don't question it. I just know it works. So it really depends on the nib and the paper and the ink color and the paper color. It really, the client is going to dictate what all of that is. And I just talk it out with them, ask them, you know, where's this going to go in your house? Is it for a little girl? Is it for a man? You know, what is this piece for, and where is it going to go? And that kind of gives you some direction in how flourished you're going to make it and what color you're going to do, things of that nature. It kind of gives you a feel for what the whole piece should look like.
Yeah.
This is what I did back in '93, and maybe it wouldn't work as great now, but I do think it's great advice. This is what I did. I went to several stationery stores in the city in which I lived at the time. I don't live there now. But I took several samples, and I would have some envelopes on white envelopes with black ink. I would do some colored envelopes with white ink, with gold ink. I would just have a variety of different colors of envelopes and ink in different styles, just so they can see everything that I do. So I would package those up really pretty, put a wax seal. I would dress, very nicely, and I would go into the stationery store like I was a customer, and I would say, I was wondering if you ever have any calligraphers that you work with. 100% of the time, they would always say, oh yes, we've got calligraphers, because they think I'm needing a calligrapher. And so then I would say, oh, that is awesome. I'm a calligrapher myself. And so I would say, I just wanted to drop off a few samples of my work. Here's my little package. Just take a look at it. Just, whenever you get a chance. They're always super nice. And so then I would usually spend about 10 or 15 minutes in the store just kind of looking around myself, shopping a little bit, but I didn't want to leave right away because a lot of times they would go back to the cash register or their desk and open it up, and then if they ever have a question, I'm just right there. And so then they come to me and they ask the question, and then we've kind of formed a bond a little bit. And honestly, most of the time, I would find something that I wanted to buy. And so then that would get me back to the cash register, and I would say, well, if you ever have any questions, just let me know. That's my card, there's my number, that's my cell on there, and I'm happy to, be of service if you ever need anybody. Just very casual and nonchalant, and, not make it pushy or anything. But I would always stay in the store a few minutes, just in case they had questions. Sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. But I wanted to be there in case they did. And that's honestly how I started. I think it's also a great idea to send your work to wedding planners, maybe to hotels that have venues that they rent out, just so they'll have that there. Just wanted to drop this by. If you ever have a wedding planner looking for a calligrapher, if you ever need a calligrapher, just wanted you to have some of my work. There's my card. Again, just super casual. And then at least they've got your work in front of them. And that's what I did way back in the day before there was Instagram. So I would definitely suggest to do that. And now that we've got social media around, I would also post pictures like you're working on a wedding, even if you're not. Make up some envelopes. You know, and you don't have to put in your caption, this is a fake envelope. You know, you can say, oh, this is the most beautiful color of ink. For this particular envelope, I use Fine-Tech Arabic Gold, you know, or whatever. And people don't know that that's just a made-up envelope. You know, and you can say, you know, this client wanted this particular color gold, even though the client is yourself. You know, they don't have to know that. So definitely fake it till you make it. And post pictures of the work that you want to do. So like, I have no interest in doing large wedding mirrors. That's just not my thing. It scares me, in fact. So I don't ever post a picture. Whatever you post pictures of, that's what people are going to associate with you, and that's what you're going to be known. And I can always remember, I was on a field trip with my daughter and her class, and a good friend of mine, one of the other moms, she showed me this Instagram account, and she said, look at this calligrapher, they post stuff all the time, you're as good as they are. And I said, I will never post my work on Instagram. Like, I laughed. The thought of doing that was terrifying to me. And I remember one day I was working on an envelope order, and I did an envelope, and I was like, oh, that looks good. You know, all my lines are centered. I didn't make a mistake. All my flourishes turned out the way I wanted them to. And I thought, if I'm ever going to post a picture, it's going to be this one, because it turned out really good for me. And so I was just like, okay, I'm going to do it. I was scared to death, but I posted it. People are so nice. You know, they were like, this is the most beautiful envelope I've ever seen. I was like, well, thank you. And I was like, I was scared for no reason whatsoever. And so slowly I would, you know, get the nerve up and post things occasionally. And I also changed, so my Instagram was just my personal Instagram. I didn't have a calligraphy one. And my setting was on private. And so when I started posting a fair amount of calligraphy, I thought, well, I need to change that to public so everyone can see it. And then when I did that, I started gaining a lot of followers. So definitely switch your setting to public if it's not already on public. And just post, even if it's just 1 or 2 letters. Say, I'm really proud of this letter I did today, you know, and explain how you make the letter. Do a little tutorial on it. But don't be afraid to post. People really are kind. They are. I mean, there are some, you know, mean people out there, of course, but the majority of people are so very nice and gracious and kind to you. So I would definitely recommend that. So, as I said, it's like if you scroll back to the very beginning, it's probably just pictures of my family. So it's S-U-Z, Z as in zebra, Cunningham. And I really, when I changed from private to public, I should have made a separate calligraphy account, and I just didn't. And so now I need to actually go back and make a personal account. So, but that's it. It's just S-U-Z Cunningham. Mm-hmm. I always recommend taking off and doing the flourishing when you really know your letter forms. Because if you try to flourish over letter forms that are kind of okay, kind of not okay, it kind of muddies up everything. And so I really love to see flourishes on really pure, correct letter forms. And this person has great letter forms. So I like this one because this one, okay, for starters, I love them all. Truly, I do. But this one stood out to me because the letter forms are really clean. They're really beautiful. They're done correctly. Like, I can tell that this person has studied, and the letter forms are just really, really good. Like, they're really good. So I don't know if this person does flourishing or not. But if they don't, I highly recommend them to add flourishing to their work. Or if they don't like flourishing, absolutely keep up the great work, because whatever you're doing is working. Beautiful, beautiful work. Yeah, I love it.